Let's get started. Once again, thank you for your participation. I currently have everyone on mute. I will unmute everyone at the end of the presentation, and if you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer. My name is Jeff Marnick, and I'm with Kubisys, and hopefully you've heard of us. We've been in the legal vertical for almost a year and a half, 2 years now. And this is our second product briefing, and we've made a lot of exciting changes and advances since then, so we're very excited to present our solution to you. First, I'd like to mention, if you received our mailer, you'll know that we are going to raffle off at the end a set of Beats Dry headphones, and we're going to randomly select that. The catch is you must still be on the call to win. So hopefully I'll keep you interested, and you'll be there at the end, and then we'll randomly select, and then we will ship you the set of Beats Dry headphones. So hopefully that's an incentive to hang in there with us. As far as today's presentation, we're going to spend a minute or so and talk about your most recent technology review and some of the findings. I think they're very interesting, and we always look forward to reviewing that report that ILTA publishes. I will give you some background to who is Kubisys, what do we do, and more importantly, how do we do it? Because what we do almost sounds too good to be true. But then the important part is, how can it help you? And of course, at the end, we'll answer questions, and we'll also raffle off the headphones. So if you had a chance to review your 2014 technology survey that came out, I guess, about a month and a half ago or so, the overall theme was secure, simplify, and save. And what that basically pointed to was security is really taking the focal point. It's being pushed by both the regulation side and also by the client side. So those projects that are security focused are all coming to the forefront. Other projects are kind of put on hold and put secondary, and security seems to be first. Whether it's a priority in your organization, whether it's a pain point for your organization, it's really being pushed outside the organization. So security is an issue. Simplify is also a theme that they discuss at length in your report. Budgets being stagnant, and we're gonna look at that in the next slide. Budgets are stagnant. Therefore, if you have a simpler approach to your applications and your infrastructure, if you can remove some of the complexity and help simplify, that should and allow you to more easily support your technologies, both in training and maintaining. That's a goal of the legal vertical in 2014. And of course, an overriding, which seems to be there year in, year out, is looking to reduce costs. Either reduce costs or certainly contain costs. So they believe the simplification will help do that. The security are costly initiatives. However, your challenge with keeping everything up and running in really a complex environment with often limited resources, and you're being pulled really in different directions. And an interesting quote that I pulled out of the report was, you're at a point now that profitability can't continue to rely on cutting expenses. So you've gotten to the point where you can't continue to cut resources and still be able to perform the functions you're asked for, especially with this added pressure of the security initiatives. And so law firms and IT organization law firms are really at a very interesting crossroads. Now, another highlight of this, and this is right out of your report, is how does top management view the IT department? And you can see overwhelmingly they see it as an expense. And that really hasn't changed. So you're a cost overhead. Now, the good news is there has been an increase of firms that recognize that IT can be an asset to the organization. However, there is a decrease in contributes to the revenue growth of the firm. So there's kind of a mixed message there. And revenue neutral has also taken a decline. So once again, when management looks at it as an overhead and expense and not enough for looking at it as an asset, and you're still required to get the job done with limited resources in an environments that are getting ever more complex, it causes for a very, sometimes unsettling. So what are the current issues or annoyances, as the report points out? Well, security and risk really took that big bounce up there, as we had mentioned earlier. But the three that seem to be constant is when it comes to change. And, how do you get users to accept change? How do you meet management expectations? How do you keep up with new software versions? How do you keep that active? And all those things stay in the top of the issues that are most prevalent. So if you kind of reflect back on the last couple slides, so you're being asked to be revenue neutral, if you will. I mean the IT as far as spending dollars. You have new initiatives in the security issue while maintaining existing initiatives and existing status quo. And yet the problems you're dealing with is change, and risk management. And that's where our solution, Kubisys, can help you out, because it's very difficult to do everything you can, everything that needs to be done today, without going to some automation tools or some tools that allow you to do your job faster, quicker, and safer. And that's really where Kubisys comes in. So who is Kubisys? Well, we've been around for about 7 years. This is our only product, which we introduced at Interrupt in October 2010. And since then, we've really focused on the mid-market. And the reason for that is because we're really breaking into a new product category. We go about this provisioning environments really based off your production. Think of it as production-based labs. And that's really a new product category. So we needed to get the word out there. So at these events, we get to present to the C-level executives. We've been fortunate to get the word out there. We've been fortunate to receive awards at a lot of these events that we attend. And I show you this slide because we are proud of this slide that the message is getting out. But also, if you look at the kind of awards we win, Breakthrough, Most Innovative, Best Emerging, and Gartner in 2013 selected us to their Cool Vendor list in the DevOps category, one of only 5 companies. Because our solution does allow you to iterate, deploy safer and faster, and that is really along that DevOps philosophy. We noticed about 1.5 years ago that we had several law firms as customers, and in further conversation, they introduced us to the ILTA organization, which we fully embrace. We're a silver sponsor, and through the ILTA, we have been successful in really getting the word out because, quite honestly, you all spread the words yourself. If you're a good product, you tell others. If it's not a good product, you find out quickly. Well, we're happy to report that we're growing in the legal vertical, and we continue to focus on it. It fits our solution quite well. You have complex issues. We help simplify them. We're cost effective. You are Windows-based. We support Windows applications. And you are somewhat, you're cost restrictive and you're resource restrictive. And we benefit you there also. So what is the problem that we really solve, and how do we do it differently? Well, as you know, you have your production servers, and whether you do in-house development or whether you work with third parties, you'll have some kind of staging and QA. And of course, the issue is that none of these environments are quite in sync with your production. So you're asked to do upgrades, you're asked to do patches, you're asked to do development in applications, test them in a separate silo, and then figure out how to safely deploy them. And if you could have more environments on demand that look like production, what would that mean to you? So we actually have a software solution. However, it comes in an appliance. So you simply install the appliance into your data center behind your firewalls. At that point, through our UI, it allows you to point to your production. And from your production, you can point to either a single server or a set of servers. And you simply select them, click on capture, and we've automated the process of spinning up these environments. Now, these environments are spun up inside our appliance. There's no agent on your production. There's no additional resources required. These environments can be used for staging, QA, development sandboxes, training, anywhere where you see the benefit of having environments that exactly replicate your production. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, if you take that staging environment, that top bubble, let's imagine that's a complete application stack. It has the web server, the app server, the database server, the Active Directory, any dependencies. Everything in that staging environment is what it takes to run that application. It's a complete application stack. Well, inside that staging environment, it will have the same IP and MAC address as it does in production. It'll have the same data as it does in production. It'll have the same networking, interdependencies, and configuration as it does in production. And in our thin capture mode, which was our original product, and we have two modes, which I'll explain to you, but in thin capture mode, you can spin these environments up in 20 to 30 minutes. Imagine that, having all the production data, all the production infrastructure, same IP MAC address, and have it spun up in 20 to 30 minutes, ready for use. Now, I want to show you a simple, let's just see if I can get through this, and I may not be able to, which is disappointing. Well, let me continue. What that was simply going to do is explain exactly how we do what we do. So let me take a minute and run that through for you. What it does, what we do is when you push the capture button, there's really two phases. One is called discovery. That's a one-time event where you discover the servers you're going to capture, either now or in the future. It takes 2 or 3 minutes. We leverage WMI, we read the CPUs, IP MAC, all that information, we store that. The capture process is really simple. You simply select those. So in the case of this slide in front of us, the production view on the left there, if you could scroll down, all those icons represent the servers that you have discovered. So that's your library. That could be every server in your data center. All your servers are listed there. You simply take the mouse through the UI, click on the 1, 2, 3, 5, whatever servers you'd like to capture, push a capture button. We've then automated the process, and whether they're physical or virtual in your environment, it doesn't matter. We P2V or V2V on the fly. So we spin those up inside our box. Because we have the information from discovery, we know the CPUs, we know the IP and MAC. So all that is installed. We install drivers. We've automated the spin up of a virtual switch, which mimics the networking. So once you push that capture button on the top there where you see thin capture bubble, what that does is it starts as a gray bubble, and 20 minutes later, when it turns orange, it means the servers you selected from the production view are now up and running inside that bubble. And remember, inside that bubble, it's a firewalled off environment, so it allows it to have the same IP MAC, have the same data, have the same networking. In that bubble, what's nice about it is you can name it, you can timestamp it, you can turn that environment on or off, you can store it, you can bring it back up later, you can give security access. And by that I mean if you're working with consultants or some UAT testing, you can give them access just to specific environments that look, act, and feel just like production. And you'll know that they won't have any ability to affect anything in production. Now, if you were to click on that thin capture bubble, what you see in the shadow environment are the servers that you captured, the ones that you selected from the production view. You then push captured. They're up and running inside that orange bubble. Now, one way to, so in this case, there's 10 servers working inside that bubble. And inside that bubble, once again, same production data, same IP MAC, same networking. One way to access these environments is simply go into one of the servers there in the shadow environment, click on it, and a console button will come up, and you simply enter the console, and you're inside that bubble working. I mentioned that we had two modes. In the thin capture mode, which was our original offering, we were really looking for that spin up an environment, do some work on it, do an upgrade, do a patch. When you're done, you go ahead, you can delete it, because if you need it again, you can spin it up. So there's no maintaining of environments. And with that feature, how we actually do that is we don't move any data. And that's the key to getting these environments up and running. So you understand, we P2V on the fly, we do a virtual servers inside our box. And when it comes to the data, at the moment you push the capture button, we leverage the VSS Shadow Services feature in Windows, and we take a snapshot of that server. And we leave that snapshot on the host server. And we read only off that snapshot the data that's required for the test. And all the writes go in our box. So from the user experience, it's as if all the data is local. So that's how we can do it in 20, 30 minutes. We're not moving data. But then we had customers come to us and say, guess what? We want to keep these environments up for weeks, and in some cases months. In the thin capture mode, it was really designed for that DevOps approach. Keep the environments up for several days, maybe a week. But they wasn't intended to stand up for long periods of time, because you're reading back off that snapshot. So when the customers came to us, we developed a feature called Save Shadow. You can think of it as thick capture. So in the case is, once we take that snapshot on that server, what we do, instead of leaving it on the host server, we actually bring it into the appliance. Now, once we bring it to the appliance, now that takes longer than 20 or 30 minutes, depending on the amount of data. Sometimes it could take minutes, a couple hours, could be overnight. But the nice thing is, once you have that snapshot inside our box, now all the resources and everything needed is all confined to our appliance. And what that's especially good for is if you want to make multiple copies of the same environment, you simply thick capture it into our appliance, and then inside our appliance, you can make several thin capture copies off of the thick capture. So that allows different groups on demand to have a critical environment spun up that looks, acts, and feels just like production. So what are the primary use cases, and how are customers using us? Well, there's really two sides. One is on the application side, of course, for development sandboxes. It allows developers to self-serve, actually help themselves. And remember, it could be a subset of your production, or it could be some golden environment. So if you have a golden environment that your operations team maintains, then that would allow the developers to go into that environment and make captures of it in as multiple environments as they like, and really be self-serving. From the QA, UAT testing, it's clear you can give them access to production-like data. Makes their job a lot easier and a lot more realistic. Application patches and upgrade, and training. Think about training. How nice it would be to train salespeople, lawyers, train people on applications using real data and real interdependencies, knowing that you're not going to affect anything in production. From the infrastructure side, they have server level patches and compliance issues they need to keep up to date, Patch Tuesday and all that good stuff. It allows them to do their job during work hours without worrying about affecting production. And if you are doing complex changes, something in Exchange or Active Directory, allows you to do it safely. One of the real values is if there's an issue or problem that comes up in production, today it's very difficult to replicate or duplicate that product in dev or test. because they're not the same environment. Our solution allows you to capture that problem in production, isolate it, and it gives them an environment that they can work and find out the root cause. So it's a great time saver. This is not intended, nor is it a DR tool. We have no way to publish back into production. So what it is good for, though, is if you have a DR plan, it does allow you to test your plan. Do you know all the servers it takes to get that critical app up and running? Do you know the best sequencing to do that? So it is not a disaster recovery tool, even though you can keep these environments up and running for long periods of time, because there's no way to publish them back into production. We protect production at all costs. So in the legal vertical, you know, your challenge with several systems, and you're all familiar with these, and a lot of these have interdependencies that go across applications. What our solution allows you to do is really do that end-to-end integration testing. It allows you to go right from Active Directory right through the last dependency. It allows you to fully check out that application before you introduce any changes, whether they be patches, upgrades, new development work. And so as you're still being asked to keep these applications up and running, and don't forget that one of the top 5 issues is change, introducing change into the environment. Our solution allows you to do that safely. So just to take a step back, you know, everyone has figured out how to take it from whether you do your own development or whether you're working with third party, how you bring that and you end up deploying it eventually into your production. You know, some do it safely, some spend a lot of money trying to set up as best they can close to production. A lot just cross their fingers and hope, and hope that the vendor's correct. What we say is, if you have the ability, before you take that package and before you deploy it in production, if you could spin up on demand an environment that looked just like your production, you can then test that package prior to deployment. You'll be able to head off not only any real tragedies, but any sloppy deployments. You'd be able to really figure out, you know, how clean is it, how full is it, and be able to thoroughly test it. Now, normally, you know, it's kind of easy to understand. That would be great if I had a production-like environment just before I deployed it. But if that would be great, wouldn't it be great for your QA and test people to have accurate environments on demand that are timely, that they can also utilize to do their job? And if you have development in-house, wouldn't it be nice to have them have access to real data, real interdependencies? Wouldn't that make their job not only better, faster, safer, more productive? What it does over time is it will improve the efficiencies of the entire organization. And today, when you're being stressed to get more done with the same or less resources, and the changes and the things you're being asked, the complexity, it is enterprise complexity. It's just mid-market budgeting. So our solution allows you to be more efficient and more effective. I want to just give you an example. One of our legal customers purchased a SharePoint plugin, had some customization done on it, and then the vendor introduced it into the environment. And of course, it went into the environment and it had a very bad outcome. It actually crashed the environment. They pulled it out, went back to the drawing board, made some changes, came back with a 30-page change control document. You know, this is how they were safely going to deploy it going forward. Well, our customer had had similar issues with other vendors. When they were coming with upgrades or patches, they were tasked to put together test environments, and whether it be limited resources or the amount of trade-off of what it would take to do it, they saw our solution as a way to help with having accurate test environments when they needed them on demand to really support their third-party relationships. In this case, They spun up a Kubisys environment, and I'll show you that on the next slide. And from that environment, they said, take that 30-page document and test drive it here. So they test drove it, and they got about halfway down the first page or so, and of course they had a problem and they crashed our environment. But it was only the Kubisys environment. So they were able to pull it out, and in the DevOps approach, make some changes, spin up another environment, try it again. They may have crashed 3 or 4 times in the first 3 or 4 days, but at that point, after 3 or 4 days and several tries, they were able to successfully deploy it into our environment, and they simply followed the same steps and successfully deployed it into the production with no problems. So the real moral of that story is they were coming up on the 8th month mark from the initial deployment, and it took less than a week when they had accurate test environment that they could recreate quickly in order to test it. So the question really is, how much more benefit would have been to the end user to get that plugin to them 7 months sooner? That's really the value of our solution. In this particular slide, everything in the orange square was what was captured inside the bubble. So they captured, and I'll read it from left to right, the user workstations and the vendor workstation, because the vendor was doing the work. Their entire SharePoint, and SharePoint is a great use case for us. If you use SharePoint to any degree, you have interdependencies that makes it extremely difficult and costly to set up good test environments. They capture their CompuGuard, their SQL with 4 terabytes and a couple domain controllers. So in order to test that plugin, this is the set they needed. Now you can have a larger set, you can have a smaller set, you can have a single server. So whatever you need for your use case. I want to show you this slide because sometimes I get the pushback, we have too much data. Our document management system has way too many documents. Well, this is the schematic of an architectural engineering firm, one of our customers, and it's also another SharePoint example. But this happens to be his core environment, and you can imagine how many documents they have. And so in his case, he wanted to capture his core environment. And so he captured a developer workstation, his SharePoint. He had 2 ERP systems. One was a homegrown with a lot of customization. He captured his Exchange, a file server, and his entire Active Directory. So this represented his core environment. And what he was able to do with this was he thick captured this. So remember, when you thick capture it, now everything's local in our box. And he can also refresh any of these databases anytime he wants inside the bubble. So he set it up on a weekly refresh, and he kept this environment up and going as a thick capture, and that allowed any of his teams to go in at any time and spin off a thin capture in 20 or 30 minutes of this environment. They could thin capture the entire environment. They could take one application. They could take one server. They could take 2 applications. So it really allowed them to self-serve as they needed to get their work done. Very efficient use case. So today it is an orange appliance, and it's the only appliance we sell and support today. In the past, we had models with lesser resources, but once the thick capture really became out there to our customers, they all gravitated because they all saw the value of thick capturing and then thin capturing off the thick capture. And so the memory here is 256 gigabytes, and there's 16 terabytes of storage. It's about 10 to 12 usable. That seems to be plenty, because don't forget, you can turn these environments off. You can delete them and respin them up. But because it is a flexible solution, if you wanted to, you could leverage your SAN. We also have a partner who sells a storage appliance. You can sit on top of our appliance that's integrated with it. Once again, a very flexible solution, so whatever your use case and whatever your need is. So we talked earlier about how do you access these environments. One way to access them is through the UI, which I explained earlier. A more common way would be simply just to port forward into the environment. Probably the most common way is capturing a workstation inside the environment. And then you simply RDP port forward from your workstation into your workstation inside the bubble, and you work from your workstation inside the bubble. You can also set up a VPN inside. Once again, very flexible solution, however best suits your use case for accessibility. Today's offering is the hardware, the X2500. We do have 3 licensing models: source server, which simply means that it's connected to a particular set of servers or application. Portable limits you to 20 servers, but you can move it from application to application. And of course, unlimited, you can make copies, as many copies and as many applications up to the limitations of the appliance. As far as professional services, we do offer training and advanced training, along with project-based work. If you wanted to leverage your SAND or you wanted to take advantage of some of the flexibility of our solution, we'll work with you to incorporate that so it works for your company and your environment. And the capture, creation, and tuning is something that's becoming very popular. It's actually where we administer the box for you for a small monthly fee. You'll simply let us know what you're looking to capture, when. We'll go in and capture it for you, test it, and hand it off to the end user. This really helps for those organizations that are administratively short on resources, and they look at us as an extension to their IT. I want to give you some idea of pricing. Of course, it depends on the licensing model, and we know the costing is important in the legal vertical. I will just tell you that the MSRP can range anywhere from about $80K to about $170K. There are discounts available, especially to the legal reference account, purchase terms discounts. So there are discounts available, but I did want to give you some understanding of the ballpark. And when we talk about ROI, if you just took the hard numbers, Gartner says every server that's up and running is $7,000 to $9,000 it costs. So if you have a bunch of test servers, a bunch of development servers that you're not using, the utilization is very low. You may only have them, you may have to maintain them often, but you may only use them very infrequently. You can consolidate those. And so the ROI is really easy to look at the hard numbers, but we really think cost reduction is really third in the value prop. You will save money. You'll save money in licensing and storage and efficiencies and manpower, lighting, heating, all that stuff. You will save costs across every resource category. But it's that time to market, getting that SharePoint plugin out 7 months sooner. It's the ability to deal with complex changes safely. It's the ability to troubleshoot errors in production safely and quickly. But at the end of the day, probably our highest value prop is if you can develop against production-like data and infrastructure, if you can test against production data and infrastructure, if you can last-mile staging against production-like data infrastructure, you are mitigating risk. You are ensuring safe changes. And don't forget, changes are 3 of your top 5 issues in the legal vertical. It helps mitigate that risk. And that's really probably our highest value prop. Just another slide or two here, just to give you some idea of what our sales cycle is. We're still getting the word out, and we're still going to introduce as many people as possible. We would then like to, if you see there's an interest, we would like to introduce it to the key people in your organization, and that includes your application side and your operation side and your ops side. This is a great tool for them. It also helps them, helps their customer, which is the development side, helps them do the job better. We'd like to introduce it there, answer all questions. If you think there's value, we'll be able to quote the pricing proposal that fits your value prop. We will then, if we agree in theory on all that, then we will come in at no cost and obligation and do a proof of concept. And that proof of concept normally takes 1 to 3 weeks. We do very little pull on your resources. Other than the initial install, we'll spin up the environments. We'll hand it off to your people to validate that it does what we say it does, and it does what we say it does in your environment. At that point, we hope you process our invoice and we continue to work with you, share best practices, and make sure you optimize our solution. That's why our proof of concept, we like to do some real work. We like to capture something that you're going to be able to continue to use post POC. And so after the POC, we'll continue to work with you, ongoing support. And I want to thank you for your time. If you have any questions, we'll take a couple now. I'll unmute in a minute. You may have noticed us at the last ILTA event. I don't know how you could have missed us. And of course, if you need additional information, if you'd like any additional documentation, if you'd like to set up a WebEx for people within your organization, please contact Kim at Kubisys